that the white hat, so with Edward de Bono's Six Thinking Hats, he said that the white hat is actually like, it takes you into like the Japanese kind of meeting. If you put on the white hat is like, okay, we're coming to this meeting and we're going to put all the facts on the table. Because he says in Japan, people don't come to the meeting with their egos and like their secret plans, which they'll try to impose upon everyone there through a battle of egos. They just don't care. They're like working together and they're like, here are some facts. And they put out all the facts and then look at the facts. And then they're like, oh, so what's the plan? Which is it. And so the white hat, which had a certain rules, you only put forth facts, not opinions. Although you could have like, oh, you know, Stephen is feeling mad about this because he said he was feeling mad about this. So Stephen said that he was feeling an emotion. That's a fact. You said that. I mean, you didn't actually say that, but that would be a fact if you said that.
Yeah.
So
That's
I'm just, you know, with the Brazilian part, you know, because Vinny was talking last week, he's like, no, you can't call it Brazilian party because then people will come to the table with stupid like notions of what they think Brazil is, and then it won't work. But, you know, I'm just saying that, you know, putting on that hat and having those like certain rules guides you into the Japanese way of thinking, even though there is no, this is the Japanese meeting thing about it.
Yeah, Lolly, my dear, before Stefan, wait a minute. Is it better now? I don't know. Yeah, it's better now. So before we welcome Stefan better, and we see Stefan's reactions to what you just commented. I just want to say that when you talk about Japan, there's a series out there called Shogun. That's you know, it's a new production, and it occurs in the feudal Japan of the 16th or 17th century. 17th century, yeah, 17th century. The 600, the 50, the 1600s, right? And so they do exactly the opposite what you just said. So, in this feudalistic Japan, they go to the table with all sorts of schemes and they how they want to destruct the lord over there and gain power and things. So I'm wondering here, where in the history of Japan become this so more mindfulness and country or people that generates this type of technique or this type of methodology, let's put it this way, to come to a gathering or something like that, because it's not related to the feudal or imperialistic Japan, certainly not. But and I can't imagine how that happened, right? Like because the only thing that comes to my mind is this more global Japan, this more international, not international, but this more global Japan that was part of the machinery of the of the the way that the North Americans, right? The way that Uncle Sam reconstruct Europe after the Second World War and establish a new mechanism of development related to consumption worldwide. And I think that the Japanese people, Japan became part of this machinery, right? They became part of this machinery, and they have some school of thoughts that are very interesting, right? They have some school of thoughts that are even more interesting than Confucius, for instance, from China. And but I don't have a clue, because you see, we just open our words here and you just share that, and I was wondering, wow, how these guys, generate such such awareness or such savvy awareness, right? Like something that you need to, so you need to have wisdom to generate something like that, to have this understanding, and coming from this very feudalistic and imperialistic Japan, right? So that's what it came to my mind, right? I know that's not exactly what you want to go with this, and nothing where you want to go, but it came to my mind, so I'm just putting it out there. And if you don't, if both of you don't want to react to that, no problem. But I just want to share it.
I'm gonna just go dealing with the customer service for a bit, okay?
Okay.
So I'll be out this conversation for a little bit. I'll put the phone down so you know.
Okay. Yeah, that was Laura's reaction.
But it's an interesting. One thing that's interesting what you just said there is, see how much there's an assumption that we always make incremental change, and that things happen because we keep ameliorating. But it might well be that extreme, almost pathological historical stuff in Japan led to the exact opposite being developed, right? Because it was a body of learning came out that, in some ways we're seeing the same thing now with hopefully with environmental issues, right? The last century everyone's fighting over this. It's like the left says, got to do this most ultimate left thing and the right things, and the two are trying to make the most extreme, and neither of them have got anything to do with the environment going on. They completely externalized everything to do with the environment in terms of socialism and capitalism. And they were both justifying themselves because they were just referencing the other person who was also ignoring the environment in many ways. And especially when they were doing their best was when they were growing the most or they were keeping things the most collective. But there was in both cases environmental destruction was rampant in Russia and rampant in the West, right? And then there is something, it's hard to know exactly how it was back. Japan was quite isolationist. It was this kind of, although the interesting thing is, like, obrigado is Japanese, isn't it? So the Portuguese were kind of kept a little bit quiet about their relationship with Japan because they kind of had this thing going on. I don't know quite how they did. They never really told.
Yeah, they were the first Europeans to ever get in touch with the Japanese people and culture.
Yeah.
They were the first one to establish a trade. They were the first one to share technologies like the gunpowder, guns, and oceanic vessels that Japan didn't have. It's the Portuguese were what the North Americans became after the Second World War, right? They were the colonizers, right? They were colonizing. But the interesting thing that this series Shogun, I don't know, in English, I think it's Shogun, yes, Shogun or Shogun, does, Stefan, is to see the inner workings, the cultural and religious inner workings of a colonization, right? Of how Portuguese got to colonize other places, other countries, right? Oh, Stefan just got out. Okay, Stefan, you're back.
Yeah, carry on.
Hey, man. Yeah, you're back. You're back.
About the inner workings. Sorry, that was I pressed the wrong button there.
It's interesting to see how we tend to see this huge intercontinental endeavor that was driven by religion, by the way, driven by a competition between religions, right?
Yeah.
This intercontinental colonization, massive colonization of all the planet, like we tend to see as a very silly, not silly, but a very rudimentary thing. But it wasn't, right? It wasn't. It was a massive undertaking. It was a massive endeavor. And you see, for two tiny European countries like Portugal and Spain, just to say, hey, we're going to divide the planets in the Tordesillas line. Boom. Oh, yeah. So this side of the planet is yours, this side of the planet is mine. This is crazy, man. This is crazy.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, you could say. I mean, I think that was the big thing with Islamic and
yes.
Christian, right? They're both expansionist religions, basically.
Yes.
Like you can never have enough, right? You can never recruit enough. Like, always want to recruit more, right? And then, of course, when those two collide in the Balkans, North Africa, it's not going to go well, right? It ain't going to go well. So, and then we had a little bit of well, it was kind of interesting because I don't know. The thing that changed.
But what I'll try to say, Stefan, before you finish, is that it was a very sophisticated way. It seems at first glance like something very rudimentary, but it was very sophisticated. There were technology, there were cultural imprints that was traded between people. There were diseases, biological diseases, right? There were all sorts of weaving of a new cultures. Like it was very similar how bacteria colonizes other bacteria, or viruses it can be colonized by bacteria or something like that. So it wasn't something simple or rudimentary as we think of, because they didn't have satellites, communication, or they didn't have TVs or radio or internet. But it's if you really go to study it, you read some books about it, and really groundbreaking. It was a very sophisticated undertaking, colonization undertaking endeavor, right? I'm impressed. I've always been impressed by it, and especially the relationship between Portuguese and Japanese. Was incredible. How the Jesuits were able to intermingle themselves in the culture, right? But it was by force. It wasn't by force, right? It was by the word.
Yeah.
It wasn't by force. It was by the word. The word of the Bible, the word of God, Jesus or whatever. But it's impressive. It's impressive how, because it was a very tight, enclosured culture, a millennium, and in an island, in a group of islands, right? This is a very impressive. So that's my.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's some work now looking at colonialization. There's some plays here by some black Canadian play, and one of them is it was actually set in an old Victorian house downtown, and one great line was like, "You came and gave us the Bible, and when we turned around, we realized we'd given you back our land. So you gave us the Bible, we gave you our land," if that makes sense. But of course, like you say, a lot there was a lot of colonialization was done through men with guns, and a lot of it was done through women, through missionaries, and also promising a lot. It's like this thing is, you know, you say you're over there, this group over here, you can come with us. You don't have to, it's completely your choice. But if you do, you'll get food, you get jobs, you get this. But it's completely up to you if you want to join the religion, right? And then a bit later, it's like, you know, then it's kill, kill, kill if you don't. But you know, it's like, but you know, there's a lot of different things went on. I mean, and to some extent, I do think though that in the early days, I don't quite know what was going on exactly how it was in terms of the Americas, but I think the thing that really changed a lot, well, the Portuguese started it, is one of the big things with colonization, and it's not so different to capitalism, is well, it really changed once capitalism was created in Holland, and because then you had this engine to extract resources like it was before you'd go and you'd try and meet a country and you'd try and trade with them, but then this exponential growth thing from capitalism kind of done that. But the other thing is a bit like people don't necessarily justify what they're doing because they think they can go and slaughter a load of other people and take over their land. They don't normally say that. What they normally do is they say, well, the Portuguese are doing it, and if we don't do it, they're going to take over there. And then the Spanish would be like, yeah, and the English are doing it. And it's about capitalism at the moment, you know what I mean? I don't agree with it, but if I don't do it, China would do it. It's the same conversation, right? It's like a lot of unethical behaviors gets justified because you're in competition with someone else who might do an unethical behavior. And then capitalism kind of becomes the engine, which kind of makes resource extraction on steroids, right? Because that's what it's strong at, right? It's leveraging all these resources. Like at the moment, look, I mean, we've seen it before, but look with the LLMs, right? How much resources in literally less than 6 months suddenly gets leveraged out of almost nowhere by the capitalist system because it looks like there's a potential value added. There's no need. It will happen in 2, 3, 4 years. It didn't need to happen in 6 months, and it didn't need to have duplication across you know. But this is how it works, right? It leverages a huge amount of resources, and it will accelerate the process of LLM development, but with huge, huge, huge resource waste, duplication. You know, not only the size of the data centers, but the fact that you'll have 10 of those data centers. When do you need 10? You know that like 8 of them will just go.
My vision around that, Stefan, is it differs a little bit from. Yes, it's basically the same. Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you saying, but I have a more expanded vision of. Mm-hmm. Of when it comes to LLMs or Chat GPT or whatever, chatbots.
Yeah.
For me, is kind of a new World Wide Web, right? Because World Wide Web is this layer of applications. You know, you have all the infrastructure of the so-called internet. Mm-hmm. You know, submarine cables, satellites, fiber optics. You know, all the connection between gadgets, you know, PCs, notebooks, smartphones. This is the hardware. This is the infrastructure, right? Yeah. So you have the superstructure. The superstructure is the layering that you put upon this infrastructure. So the first layer that was tested was the so-called World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, in the 90s. Right? But that was the version 4 of the Internet Protocol. I don't know if you know that. They had attempts during the 70s and 80s of 3 versions, of 3 previous versions. And you want to know what? The most sophisticated one was the V1, was not the V4. Mm. And because the first version of Internet Protocol, you know, the IPv1, not IPv4, Internet Protocol version 1 or Internet Protocol version 4, because it was version 4 that became Web 1, right? And the one had cryptographic signatures. The one has cryptographic. The one the data was yours. Your data was yours data. You have the possibility to share it or not. You know, the hyperlinks in the one were they were not dummies hyperlinks. They were intelligent hyperlinks because it has a stack of technology that could talk between each other. But there was a war between people come from the Bell Company. Have you heard about the Bell Company, the great telephone operator of the United States?
Actually, he grew up in Canada, funny enough. But anyway, carry on.
Yes, because it's become huge, right?
Yeah.
And so there's the Bell Company, and there was people coming from academia and the military because of the DARPA projects, you know, that was called the network guys. So there was a war between the Bell heads and the net heads,
right?
To establish what could become the so-called internet protocol. A war in the sense that each part wants to remain relevant to this new infrastructure. So there was a war between political economic power and intellectual power, intellectual struggles between this. So the first version was a beauty. It was incredible. So they had to dumb it down in a sense to become a very simplistic, a very just peer-to-peer, protocol to send and receive data with no hard cryptographic around it, a very basic cryptographic wrap of the data, like the packages, right?
Yeah.
And the packages of data, and because of because what Bell wanted out of it, or what academia wanted out of it, or what the military wanted out of it. So the IPv4 was the version was the version 4 of the internet protocol, right? Was the dummiest one, and it was the one that dumbest in the sense that was the less sophisticated, and it was the one that made history, right? It made history. So why I am saying this to you? you want to ask?
No,
right?
no, it's keep going. No, because I'm thinking about a couple of things as you're saying that. This is good.
What I'm saying is that web2 as this layer of applications has a whole new technology. So come with me. The web1 is this first layer, the IPv4, right? The Internet Protocol version 4 that already has a version 6. I don't know if you know that. It already has a version 6, like 15 years now, or even more, a version 6. That it enables you to store more data or to index more things that IPv4 doesn't, right? But it's still being implemented or not for for people and projects all around the world. But circling back, so if you understand that this was a layer that has its own infrastructure, informational architecture technology behind it, the Web1, right? The IPv4. Web2 using IPv4 is another layer of a whole different way for you to relate to internet. Because in Web2, you work with semantic web. Semantic web is solely based on algorithms, algos, right? So in Web 1, the navigation was between peers, and the peers itself was the nodes of the internet. Got it? The peers, you with your PC, you were a node. You were a node, a receiving or an emitting node, and sustaining this layer of applications of the Web 1, right? So you were part of it. You were sustaining the existence of the cyberspace, of the internet, of this Web 1 thing, right?
Yeah.
In Web 2, but Silicon Valley couldn't make a buck out of it. They couldn't make a buck out of it. Like, hey guys, we are not earning money. Come on. I put a lot of money there, like Andreessen, for instance,
yeah.
and an early one, to generate Mosaic, the first browser, and it was open source Mosaic. Mosaic was very open source, and then it served as inspiration for the so-called Internet Explorer from Microsoft. So
and you had Netscape, didn't you? Oh, was it Netscape?
Yeah, Netscape. Yes, Netscape, and the most famous one became Netscape. Right? It was a startup that created Netscape, having as reference the open code from Mosaic. But Mosaic was very text related. Mosaic didn't allow navigation between images, for instance. Like, so you couldn't search for instance for images in Mosaic. Mosaic was purely text. And and Netscape was already image. So it was leaps ahead in this sense. But what I'm trying to say here that Web 2 has a whole new, like you've got to put a whole new cybernetic ontology to it.
Right.
So,
right.
Because it's related to algorithms, and it's related to semantic webbing. So you need server clients.
So you didn't need servers before. So that's where the servers came in.
Yes, exactly that. So the server clients became the nodes.
Right. So you didn't, in the early days of the internet, you didn't actually have servers. It was just
no, it was you with your PC at home or at your office. You were the node. You were the node, and the storage of the navigation, the cache, it was automatically downloaded for your PC. You see?
And then when did that finish? That changed around 95, did it? When did
that changed in the turn of the century. In the turn of the century.
So it's 2000s. Okay.
Yes, and it has the millennial bug, right? Something like that. The clock.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So, and you have the bubble crash, the internet bubble crash. That happened. That was forced, right? That happened because, you know what? When you want to burn money, that became not good investment or not good money.
Yeah.
Like it's like the Vikings burning out their vessels, right? Or their things. Like let's do another thing. So the bubble.com was a Viking experiment done by Silicon Valley, basically. Like let's burn all the things that we've done in Web 1 and let's do differently in Web 2, right? Let's do differently with this technology. But the most interesting thing, Stefan, is that the same guy that suggested Web 1, Tim Berners-Lee, still alive, right? Yeah. He was the one that published in the 90s, in the early 90s, 91 or 90, don't remember, this World Wide Web paper, with all this infrastructure. Right. And he was the one in 2001 to publish the web semantic paper based on algos. So for him, for his understanding, he was he was proposing a more sophisticated, a more, you know, a more navigational web for people, and he was proposing that that all the hard work, all the hard lifting work of browsing the internet would do by servers.
Right.
Now by the not by the communication between peers, between NPCs. You see, between gadgets. So without noticing, without understanding what he was doing exactly, but he was giving a green card for Silicon Valley to take over the cyberspace, and that was happened. Was a takeover, literally. Like if now it's the case now for you to have, you know, client servers.
Yeah.
Oh, let's have a farm of client servers for, you know, any type of application that we can put in Web2. So social media, it starts with blogs, right? Blogs, blogging, and then social media, and you have search engines, more sophisticated search engines, and then they invented the cloud computing.
Yeah.
Cloud computing. So cloud computing is like the paradise for consumption, you know. It's the paradise for capitalistic consumption, capitalistic consumption mechanism.
Consumption, yeah, that has been the journey, and I mean some of it sort of mirrors the way that technology.
That's why, just for me to finish.
Yeah, go on.
That's why we became users of internet. You know, we became not only users, you became the raw material, you became the product of internet. And that's where big data was created. You see?
Yeah, that's true. And then you go through their system. I mean, the other thing is, as the speed of the fiber cables got faster, you could transmit a lot more through the, you know, I mean, it made this technologies became the ones that could sort of, like before, like when you had really slow downloads, you couldn't really do server farms wouldn't make sense, right? Because you couldn't get anything to it or from it. But then suddenly, once the cables all got speedy, although then it becomes very wasteful because now we have so much one to many. You know, like we have YouTube. It's got like YouTube compared to in the past, we'd have like one video going out. Compared to broadcast media where you have one thing being broadcast. Now you have a million videos being read a million times, you know, whereas in the past it would just be one signal going out, you know. Now, of course, you had to catch the signal and you had to this, that, and the other. But, you know, so then you had feeds basically, didn't you? Which is basically the same as news feeds, which is literally, because my brother was working at IT, like that's what you have if you go to the newsrooms, or not so much now, but you literally have news feeds. That's what Twitter is basically. It's the news feeds for Reuters that used to go out to all the news agencies.
But what I want to point out here with all this, my rambling here is that because of course I'm not going to go to greedy needy details of it because it's not the case for the flow of our conversation here, is that you see in the Web1 space we were cyber explorers.
Right.
We were cybernetic explorers in the cyberspace. We had the potential to be co-creators of this cyberspace. In the Web2 space, you're only a user, a consumer, and your data is the raw material to generate products. You know,
you become more. I mean, you do sort of become a designer. You graphically. It hands the tools for design a little bit, but you're right, it does. And
the last thing that I want to say is that with cloud computing, Stefan, it's a type of technical feudalism. Because techno feudalism.
Yes.
You want to know why? Because it became worse even with smartphones, because internet became the smartphone. Like internet,
Yes.
the understanding of internet became the smartphone and the apps that you have inside of it. So you see the difference between a space to be discovered, to be explored and co-created, like was Web1, and to this very corporative and nation states space of apps in a smartphone or iPhone, whatever.
Yeah.
That became, and so every app that you do, it has to be hosted in the farming business of AWS from Amazon or Azure from Microsoft, or for Google Cloud. You see? So capitalism was captured by the technical feudalism of Web2.
That's
There's a
true.
capture. So, and you have to pay 30%, 40% to be there, to have the app.
Yes.
To be part of this hyper-consumist, interconnected, global microeconomy, right? This is crazy, man. That's exactly what we live with Web2. And for me, LLMs, chatbots, AI, generative AI is just another new Web2 layer.
Yes.
It's a fork. You have the actual Web2 layer, and there's a new layer that's being created related to AI generation.
AI. Yeah, I mean, it's basically, I mean, you've got all, I mean, if we just take it as the straightforward going in there and interrogate, I mean, I don't know how it's going to go with APIs, but it's basically another software as a service, right? You log in, you pay a subscription if you want, and it's a software as a service. ChatGPT, you can use the free one, which is becoming more and more limited, and then you pay $20 a month and you get ChatGPT 4.
But in terms of first principles, Stefan, it's cybernetically speaking, is based upon big data. Still, it's all the LLMs out there need big data. Need big data. They
Yeah.
need.
They do. They do.
About big data. So what I'm saying is that where can we go from here? Where we are now with this revival of Web2 via LLMs, right? Via this regenerative AI layer that's being created, right? By big companies, by the big tech, by Microsoft, by Google, by OpenAI, whatever. Is a Web3. So, but the actual Web3 that is out there is related to crypto markets. Is related to Web2 too, right? Is related to financial input. So, but we have the opportunity to create a whole new Web3 related to peer-to-peer, to regeneration, to coordination between peers. So that's the huge opportunity that we have with Web3 now. That is not being envisioned, is not being widely envisioned by who is looking to Web3 and only seeing blockchain technology or seeing crypto markets or seeing DeFi, whatever, right? So they are not seeing or even Bitcoin. Someone could argue that Bitcoin is not Web3, right? It's a different thing. It's a different beast. But if you look with the lenses of cybernetics, you see that Bitcoin generates a new economic, cultural primitive for the so-called internet. That is the internet of money. You see, because Bitcoin doesn't have any dependency of central banks, or even the banks or whatever. So yeah, so if you look at it in a broader scheme of things, Bitcoin could be considered the first Web3 economic and cultural blueprint that came out that gives sense to Web3 as this new possibility to create a new cyberspace, a totally new cyberspace from the actual cyberspace that we're actually in.
And then this will change and that could change the way we meet. There is one thing that I would say with this though, is I don't know if it's like everything moves, it's not necessarily a case of everything then moves to Web3. Like there's still something to be said. Like you could have potentially a trusted vendor in a Web2 space that does some of the stuff that Web2 does well. Like I'm looking at a stakeholder management software or something like that. Okay, because at the end of the day, if I have something where I'm relating stuff or I'm doing information which it's not just my own proprietary theories, right, and that I'm communicating my theories to your theories, but we're actually working in some sort of evaluative framework. Maybe we're trying to sort of give opinions on how different people, it might be that just needs to be hosted somewhere, and that whoever's hosting it, they need to there needs to be some contractual way in which it's like, okay, you're getting paid, you have to do, just like the difference if you go to a hospital, right? A hospital gets paid, but a hospital has to maintain records at a level that a hospital has to maintain records in terms of personal privacy and and they get paid for that, and there's and then you've got okay, but now that could be then, so you want some things to be kind of ring fenced, right? Because the problem you have before is like someone hacks my average computer. So in theory, it could be a good thing that these people, as long as they're not exploiting it. And one of the advantages of some things about Web 2, although things just keep moving on and on, is in some ways, as these technologies move on and on, the open source world can come in and say, actually, we've got enough stuff here. It may not have all the bells and whistles, and it's not going to, like I talked to someone in the park, his child was in the park, he works for Facebook actually, it was quite interesting, he works for Facebook. Do you know how many engineers they've got? I didn't know, 50,000. They've got 50,000 engineers. They've got this massive block in New York, apparently. They own a whole block in New York, and it's just all Facebook. I don't know how many they've got there, like they've got thousands of people. So basically but it's fine. So look, they're going to have, but they're throwing huge resources at it, but you don't need all of those resources.
15,000 or 50,000? 15,000 or 50,000?
50. I know. I was surprised. That's a lot of fucking people. Now, I mean, how many of them are really experts? But they because they're so busy because what they try and do in Facebook, this is the thing, they're trying to do this. They've got a lot of stuff going on there, right? And they are trying to, obviously they're also trying to metrics it. And in fairness, and this is not really excusing them, because actually, like I say, I know someone who's going to court with Facebook at the moment and has been there 5 years and still hasn't managed to get too far. But they
that's the woman who had the libel scandal.
Yeah.
Okay, we've heard about her.
But she doesn't want to go.
Is she gonna come public one day? Are we gonna get to talk to her?
Oh, you could do, yeah. Well, maybe you could maybe just, I'll put her in touch with you. Maybe you two can have a chat, and just the two of you, like as a woman to woman type thing. But yeah, she like, can you get this taken down? It becomes very, I mean, well, basically Facebook, they don't want to settle because the others aren't settling. I don't know. I think they would have settled on it for something. I don't know yet, but it's they just got a whole legal team, right? So they're not even like they're paying it. They've just got their own in-house lawyers in Canada, right? So she's got these lawyers that can come. So they've probably got their wages covered anyway, right? This is the challenge, right? But they have got, like, Facebook does not want, like, Facebook is only because what they did has come to light, and they've had to go to court and everything now. So, but they were basically, actually originally they weren't making that much money. And then everything, this is the trouble with capitalism, isn't it? You have that period of time where you can just speculate, and then suddenly it's time to cash in. And then every dirty little trick gets used to squeeze money, from creating regime change in Africa and paying dodgy people to do that, to, like Facebook early on, they weren't monetizing that much, but they had it all in the background. Then they started monetizing. And anyway, Tibby's here, but there was two things. One thing I wanted to point out is, so I think this is really interesting what you're saying. I'm just really curious, because I was putting in the Discord about stakeholders, and where does Web2 sort of become useful if you've got trusted places where just nuts and bolts things happen, and where does it work for different types of engagement? And I've seen some of this crypto stuff has been the Communities Foundation in Canada has just started talking to some crypto people, and there's an interest in it. And I think there's, this project we're doing with Tim, where we're trying to bring this, well, we're using the term community ICT, but I actually wonder whether we have to think in different ways with this idea. It's like how should we put it? Where there's different kinds of interactions, and there's different kinds of risks, and there's different kinds of things that you own. Like there's certain things where you want to make sure that no one can intercept data, right? You've got certain things where, your data's just, there's certain things where, like for instance, we got the community at the moment in Thorncliffe Park, and basically, and I know Tim's kind of a little bit nervous about going on something like WhatsApp. Basically, they all use WhatsApp, right? Pretty much. That's what now they could use Signal, they could use something else. Now I don't even know who runs Signal, but Signal things, but they're using one of those things. But in some ways, there's only so much risk with that but there's only so much use with that at the same time. It's because they're just basically coordinating stuff through the chats, right? It's kind of what you might call a community, it's a collective community ICT. They're using information technology in a sort of collective community sense, but they're not doing any evaluation on there. So the difference between me going on a platform and sharing a story is one thing, but if I have someone now, I give my opinion about that story, or someone else gives an opinion, we kind of use it as an evaluation tool. We use it as some sort of research tool, right? Now that data becomes a lot more problematic because it's been leveraged, and you've either got the risk of the fact that someone can look at that and be upset by the way that I'm interpreting that data, right? Because they might think, well, you might not like what has been interpreted, right? And so there's a certain sense of how do you feature that in. And this has been done, I'm connected to someone who's doing some research with York University in another place, and they're very, like they won't let her, she can only log into the university computer, and they won't let her log in other routes. They're like, how do you maintain? So what it means to maintain or own your data means something different in different contexts. Like another one that came up was, we're trying to put in internet equipment in Thorncliffe Park. And again, you could call all of this community ICT, but in some ways it might be seen as place-based ICT. In which case, like, where would I put the equipment? And if I'm in a rural area of Brazil, I might actually want a local group and basically say, here's the equipment, you're the community that puts the equipment up. But when you're in a major city like Toronto or Montreal, it's not sort of the same thing really. So there's a place-based question, and in terms of ICT, and again, this could be interested in terms of like having videos or and there's risks in terms of, well, there's the risk of it not working. So there's like, can you get something that actually works? You've got the risk locally amongst the people using it, and maybe people behaving correctly. And then you've got this risk of foreign actors, external actors coming in and being able to hack or do something, right? You've got these three things. Now, I think at the local scale, there's a risk of those external hackers, which in some ways can still happen to these big companies, but they're less likely. That's why they've got the 50,000 engineers, right, at Facebook, right? Because they've got like 128-bit encryption, and they've got encryption on encryption, and they've got, they'll spot it if someone's trying to do something to their system in ways that it's probably not easy for someone locally to ever do, right? But there's also other risks which big corporations can't take on, because corporations, they don't want to get into the nitty bitty, right? They just want it to be like, I give you the infrastructure and you come back with, and you just click, you just report problems. Basically, you tell me if there's a problem, then I'll follow it up, right? But if you've got something that's actually locally community based, you want to be like, the data is really as important as it is to the people. You know, I could have exactly the same infrastructure with the same things going on in 3 different places, but in one of them, the nature of the conversation is more sensitive. And it's not more sensitive from a computer technology point of view or a web3 point of view. It's just more sensitive because either the people are more vulnerable, or people are saying certain things, or I don't know, you know. And so I was thinking that's where maybe a peer-to-peer ICT is slightly different. It is different to, say, a collective community ICT, because or a place-based ICT, because generally speaking, if I'm doing peer-to-peer, I might be, the risk is the work risk. I'm sharing, like for instance, when Lauren might have been sharing more about her business idea or that work, she's sharing some of that type of world. In a community-based ICT, that might not happen as much, but you might share more about your next door neighbor. And if you share something about your next door neighbor and you're in the same place as others who are near your next door neighbor, the risk is greater. If I share something about my next door neighbor on here, it makes no difference, right? Because no one's within 100 miles of where I live. So yeah, so we you know, there might need to be these different ways that we think about risk based on where you are, what you are, how resourced you are. I remember I was out in South Africa, and this school, I'm not kidding, it was so remote, you had to drop the team off there on a 4x4, and they slept there for the week, and then we picked them up a week later to do their workshop because it was too far away up this road where you needed to drive. There was no tarmac or anything. In one of the classrooms, there was only a small school, a whole classroom was full of computers, right? They've got all these computers from Japan, and this is going to make you sick when you hear this, right? And like, this place is right, all there is just Mozambique on the other side. Like, you can't do anything. It's real like people living in huts type thing. A whole room full of computers, and not one of them had enough RAM to start up the OS. So they basically had 20 boxes of toxic plastic junk now, and the only thing you do have out in the middle of nowhere is at least it's not polluted. And now someone's going to dig a hole in the ground and freaking burn this shit once they realize. But of course, when they got it, they all assumed that the problem's them. But literally, they're being donated computers, which were like, they weren't even that great a computer, but they're okay. But they didn't put enough RAM in the computers, so none of them would start. And that's the sort of BS. Now, what is that? They don't even need to be on the internet at that point. There's no internet connection there. There was no internet at all. It's out in the middle of nowhere. But supposedly these kids that really needed to learn how to grow food would learn how to get on and learn learn how to use computers, So maybe one of them would go to university out of 100. It's so I don't know how. I think breaking things down into different, like, we might need to get more nuanced in terms of how do we, just like when you talked about those meetings earlier, like, there's cultural ways in which technology or social infrastructure is thought about. And I don't think, I'm actually going to paste something in the chat for you, Lauren, as well, about, there's I don't know if it's this one. Oh, I'll post this because I put it in the thing, but there's another one I put in the chat here, which is about the different types of ways that meetings happen. I don't know if you know this. Have you ever? This is a report on it from Business Insider, but there's ways people negotiate in meetings, and that sort of comes back to what you said earlier. I put it in the chat, and it's like different cultures, supposedly this is how they structure their meetings. So if you look in the chat there, it's got like different patterns of meetings and how they do it, and who's the most out there, who's the most aggressive or the most passive in terms of the way that they approach meetings. So Germany.
Oh, I'm checking it out.
Yeah, France.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's a whole thing on that.
Oh my gosh, look at.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting.
Oh, this is so interesting. Oh my God.
And there's another thing that goes with that.
What is it?
Part of the cultural categories of communication. Yeah, it's quite a cool work. I don't know if the guy's still alive who did it, but I mean, what I think is interesting with this though, this assumes meetings by people from a certain social class. Because I think in Canada, the Canadians are kind of like the Finnish, but I don't necessarily know what the working class Canadians like. Probably, you know, but this is the way that meetings happen. Now this sort of thing becomes interesting though, because it's sort of,
I don't get this totally, but
this.
it's kind of hilarious when you see the different structures. Like the Italians, they're just like
Yeah, verbose, increase in verbosity. Then they start digging themselves out of a hole probably at the end.
I'd love to show this to my husband, who's like worked internationally in like, you know, Italy and France and Spain and stuff.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how much this jives, right? I mean, it'd be interesting to know what it, I mean, I'm sure it changes a bit actually, even with industry, right? So I'd be interested to know whether this is a particular kind of business that's observed through, you know, because these are kind of like business meetings. So what kind of business, I don't know necessarily, right? And there's another one here which is supposedly about how, yeah, linear active, multi-active, and reactive. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. So the Hispanics and the Africans, actually interesting, Africans are actually, I never noticed that before, Africans, they didn't break down Africa very much, they just put Africans all as one on there, but they put them very up near Hispanics, so very multi-active. Germany and Japan are two kinds of linear active. France, Russia, yeah, interesting. Do you see that triangle there on the, I don't know if you see the next link I put in.
Oh my gosh, look at Singapore.
Where's
Tactics.
Singapore?
Mention competitors, fake anger, hinting you may fail. Last minute demands, stalling, inflated initial price, pretended they do not care about outcome. Whoa, whoa.
Yeah, there might be some people that like take offense with that one. I don't know where that came, but you should really, they should really have a bit. I know but it'd be interesting to see this done even for like one country for a few different industries or a few different contexts. Because oh, what's this one? Austria. Oh, there you go. Richard Lewis. Is it Richard Lewis? Yeah. There's a guy, there's a whole set of papers on this, so you can see some videos on him explaining it. One of the things I found interesting, he said that in terms of intercultural competence, Russians and Chinese are particularly, like Chinese expat or Chinese immigrants in America are very interculturally competent because they're bridging both worlds. And Russians actually pretty good like that, actually, in terms of bridging worlds, because they sort of understand the European world and they understand I don't think they understand the African world at all, though, necessarily. But maybe the English have a little bit more of an idea of the African world.
But I don't understand the graphics. Like why? How do you decode the graph?
Well, I think it's left to right is how the meeting progresses over time.
But why? Sometimes they're like triangles. Sometimes they're like squares.
Oh, I see. Well, I suppose it's diverging, converging.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure why some of them are curvy. Or maybe that's how flex, maybe it change, maybe curvy means it kind of varies. It changes a lot. Yeah, it's to sort of give a sense of how much energy's put into it, I think. So I know they've got a little one with like a squiggly line that goes round and round. I don't know which one that is again. Oh, the Dutch have got an interesting one. It just basically hits a brick wall. It's kind of interesting. Like I say, yeah, I don't really know because I haven't. Well, you might have a fairly interesting perspective on this, Tiberius, because you probably have had to work across a few cultural contexts with. I mean, it's different. Quebec is different to Ontario, isn't it? Even Sweden, that's it. Sweden discussion.
Look at Israel. Rationality mixed with some emotion. I think there's a lot of emotion there.
Yeah.
Rationality.
But is it revealed or is it sitting under the surface? I don't know. I mean, the Brazilians and that, the idea of the African and Brazilians, they will name and state their emotions.
Wow, openly delicious, manipulative and underlay. Pragmatic conclusion. Where did you get this? This Business Insider.
This one's a bit, yeah. I mean, I just looked it up. It's they've taken it from somewhere else actually. That's all come from. There's a whole book on it. There's loads, but I thought this was kind of an accessible version.
Yeah, it's interesting to see these cultural differences. There are patterns like that for sure.
Yeah. And like I say, that might well be quite different if you do something in a social context or a different cultural context. Like if you were to go into a working class engagement in Switzerland, it'd probably be quite different to this, right? This is kind of a certain type of meeting of a certain,
business meetings.
Yeah, business. Yeah, so someone at the kind of that level.
Yeah.
It's actually a negotiation. Actually, it is a negotiation. So maybe if you're negotiating, yeah, it's negotiations. Hong Kong, rather verbose, restate position, increase eloquence, quick concessions to achieve deal. Interesting. I mean, yeah. So this is not a dialogue. This is not. I have to not think in terms of my dialogical ways. This is like.
When people try to systematize business processes and stuff like that, we can see how the cultural sensitivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, exactly.
Most of the time it's like just bullshit. It's like, okay, it may apply in your neck of the woods, but you try to go to Italy with that kind of business approach or business model, And I was talking to an Italian guy that is a designer, and we were talking about the Japanese and Italian culture of design. So why are they good to make one of a kind, like very expensive cars, make like made like by hand almost? They're artisans, right? They have a culture of artisans. They don't have a culture of mass production, and there's deep cultural roots. And even the guy was saying he's Italian himself. He's an architect, and he was saying that to go back to the origins of the term work, for an Italian guy, work comes from labor. You have to sweat, so it's like you have to apply yourself to it. And in German means machine. into something related to machine. So they see work as being something that's being automated. Okay, so that's ingrained in the German culture. That's why they focus. You know, they're good at mass production and creating these factories, machines that make machines. You know.
Yeah.
And the Italians, they say you can never get them out of that because they see so much pride in sweating over that thing.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
it just gets into the corporate culture. You know what I'm
It's
saying?
a big part of the yeah, and they still hold that even if it's not. I mean, obviously, northern Italy's where it's very mechanical, like they've got like engineering, and then you've got the southern Italy's probably a bit more embodied, you know, but they still take pride over their food and stuff, you know. So yeah, it does.
They're artisans, exactly. They say, yeah, they're artisans. So they master some form of art.
Yeah.
But you are involved with it. You put your hands into it. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
the quality is big. Like for the Japanese, the same thing, right? The Japanese have a very
High
close.
level of that.
Yeah, when it comes to manufacturing design, Japanese are very close to the Italians. You see masters of this, masters of that. You know, a guy just to cook rice, for the best sushi master in Japan. You know, it takes you 3 years just to cook rice of training and practice. So they take it to the extreme. You know, it's like the Italians. They make beautiful and very high quality things.
Yeah. And the English like kind of novelty, like English, like you get you get this high end stuff, but traditionally, like they didn't pay that much attention to food beyond. It was more functional, right? But then other thing, yeah. So basically, where your values are, structures, and some of that's just down to the geography. I think geography's got one of the big factors, right? But just the way the land is that you live on, right? But
yeah, but even when it comes to organizational structure, you know, like the Germanic people, they try to systematize the company, right?
Yeah.
The Italian, you have the more type of the benevolent dictator, the paternalist approach to companies, where the founder of the company is the soul of the company, and he's on the floor. He's on the floor with people. I know very successful Italian people, like billionaires, personally.
Right.
The guy is like almost 80 years old. He's still walking the floor and talking to people and hiring and firing himself. You know,
Yeah.
and the company is huge, but he's in charge of that.
Right. And he enjoys it.
And now he's passing that to his sons. Whereas probably the Anglo-Saxon, you want to systematize that. You want to create procedures, rules, governance. So people fall into that kind of, how do you say, machine-like organization. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So Italian companies are ruled by men, and Anglo-Saxon companies are ruled by principles and governance. It's their machines, right?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that whatever you find in design and engineering is based into organizational culture, right?
Yeah. Oh, it does. And the UK is quite influenced by class, so you end up people deferring. They'll stay in the lower areas, but they'll bitch about the higher areas, and you get the class war, and you get that. You don't get as much class war, but North America is definitely more hierarchical than UK. Although the UK has got this kind of hidden hierarchy, which is kind of.
Like in
France,
also
right? North
like
America is pretty much like Canada's very strong with the public school system. It's still pretty prevalent, especially when you go to Ottawa. I'm sure, like the politics and that. How many of the politicians in Canada and a lot of the top people? I think Montreal even is like there's a lot of old money in Montreal. How much does that influence who's in the positions of senior? I don't know. It's not as visible though.
Also related to that, but slightly kind of switching topics, you talk about Facebook having, I don't know how many, like what did you say, 50,000 employees or something like that?
Engineers.
Well, Telegram is run by I think it's like 12 people. And it's so the one thing here is that, you know, in order to run a sort of a communication platform, you don't need a lot of people. But Facebook does some other things, you know, some of which are very nefarious. You know, they get into the business of I don't know, censoring people and fact checking and all that, and then they have all these contracts of you know, selling data, contract with governments, and blah blah blah. So you need a lot of employees for that. They're not just running a communication company.
No, exactly.
They're running a very complex business.
And some of that censoring they need, because I mean the trouble is with something like Facebook is, yeah, you've got some people like, there's a question of should it be on there, shouldn't it be on there, and then you've just got some you've just got bad actors or just people being dicks. Do you know what I mean? And that's very hard to control, right? It's just general bad social behavior, right? And you've got like lechers, and you've got sexual predators, and you've got, you know.
Yeah, but Telegram, they just make a choice, you know. So they say,
yeah, but okay, it's a bit more closed, isn't it? Because you invite theoretically you don't have that. You don't have the same.
It's architectured in that way. That's what I'm trying to say. It's architectured in that way. You know, you just you want to have your own bubble. Okay, fine. You know, you sign up with that channel. It's up to you, and you have all the walkers there, and that's fine with us. You know what I'm saying? But you kind of compartmentalize all these things, right? That's part of the active. But also, you know, the Telegram is run by this Russian guy, and the Russian culture is also very paternalistic, and they also have this. They put a lot of importance on efficiency. They're very minimalistic, but highly efficient. You know, they prize intelligence. Okay, so if you look at the, you know, like Russians are the best in very complex mathematics, you know, and physics. They're really, really good at it, especially in mathematics. Like very sophisticated, you know, mathematical theories, like chaos theories, nonlinear stuff, you know, and they're good at you know, filtering. So what they do is essentially they put in place filters to get the best of the best, and then they create these very, very efficient organizations, and they create very efficient artifacts, extremely efficient artifacts. I spoke to a pilot once, and he says that, you know, when he got into a MiG fighter, he was amazed by the simplicity of that plane. It's like the Kalashnikov, you know, it's simple and it works, you know, never jumps. You know, so that's the kind of the Russian philosophy when it comes to things and organizations, you know. Make them as small, as simple as possible, but highly efficient, and they filter who gets in.
Yeah, I heard. And of course, the influence of communism has been a big one, because I worked with, well, I didn't work with them, but I know the people who does something called socio-mapping in Prague, and they actually socio-mapped the astronauts that were going to go on the trip to Mars. They simulated a trip to Mars. They didn't actually get to go, but they simulated it. So they just literally got into this capsule, and they were in there for like 9 months, and then they get out. Imagine they're going to do.
Professor James Caesar of the University of Virginia. He will be here to talk about E Pluribus Unum right after this break.
This is something from 2008, Another World. 2008, about American identity. You guys are gonna love the initial part. Just a sec.
Our live coverage today on C-SPAN 3 begins this morning at 8:45 Eastern with speeches from the American Israel Public Affairs Council Annual Conference. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, House Minority Leader John Boehner, and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. Then Democratic presidential candidates Senators Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Senator Obama will speak first to AIPAC at 9:50, followed by the speech from Senator Clinton. The New York Times reports this morning that regulators of the nation's commodity markets announced on Tuesday steps to determine more information about investors to determine whether they're evading market limits on speculation and artificially driving up world food prices. The Senate Agriculture
E Pluribus Unum, the Bradley Project on America's National Identity. Welcome to the program.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Tell us, what is America's national identity, and where did the idea for this report come from?
Well, let me start with the idea of where the report came from. I believe a number of people were concerned a couple of years ago about the prospect of national identity and unity, worried that the country was becoming a bit frayed, that people were dividing into different camps, not just politically, but at a more fundamental level, which we can discuss. And that the idea itself of national unity, there was something commendable and admirable in national unity, that idea itself was being lost. And so then
I'm just watching this video. Whose video is it? Is this? This is Vinicius is just sharing this video. Can you see it? It's interesting, isn't it? Like the whole style is very different to what we have now.
Yeah, this is only 2008, right? It's only 16 years ago. And
it's a massive. But that shows you one of the influences of technology, right? Because see, my brother works at ITN, that works in the newsroom. Like he works as a server manager for the newsrooms like CNN, ITN, and that Sky in London. And back then, everything would have had tapes. You had like racks of tapes. You had to literally put tapes into tape recorders and play them, right? And you'd mix it. Now it's all done on servers. So you couldn't, like, one of the things that's happened, you see this even like with music videos as well, because back then you used to have to use tape to digitally load up, and you had to literally cut, well, not then, but not far before then, you had to literally cut by taping tape together, right? So you didn't have this cut that you can get now, right? And jump, because it was just punitively time consuming. So technology's changed the way we make stuff.
My intent in sharing this is just how they were viewing American national identity in 2008. So different from what we're talking about now. So I just want to make I just want to share a little bit what he's saying to you guys, have a sense of how far it became. Like it seems like another world, foreign planets. It's impressive.
It's kind of scary in a way. But yeah. Wow.
The origin project was sponsored thereafter by a foundation called the Bradley Foundation, and held a series of meetings over a couple of years. A large number of individuals from education, public life, journalism met, discussed these ideas. A report on the basis of these meetings was generated, and this is the product here.
So with so many different groups, different ethnic groups, different gender groups, people with different interests, how does this report define the American identity?
Well, in a way, that's the starting point. Are these different ethnic groups, different racial groups, are those the primary basis of identity of people? Do they see their identity rooted in these groups? Or is there a deeper source of unity? And of course, that's what we're interested in, whether something beneath the level of the ethnic or racial group was the source of unity. And that is what you could call the quest for and the idea of a national identity. Now, both of these values, you could say diversity and unity, are present in the United States. Hence the name of the title of the report, E Pluribus Unum, which is on the seal of Great Seal of the United States. Viewers can find it on the back of their dollar bill. It's found in the ribbon of the beak held by the great eagle. And it means, coming from Latin, something like from many, one, or from diversity, unity. So the premise is that these two values, namely diversity and unity, aren't necessarily in tension, that they can live together. In fact, I think the premise of the report is that if you're going to have a healthy diversity, it has to be grounded or rooted in a fundamental unity. And that the unum, or the unity side, is crucial to the protection of healthy diversity. Otherwise, your diversity will fly off into warring camps and warring tribes. So that's how these two things come together, unity and diversity.
The report, I believe, says that 63% of Americans believe that the national unity is weakening, and 1 in 4 believe that the nation is so divided that a common national identity is not possible. Elaborate on that for us.
Well, part of the project involved a survey taken by Harris Interactive, which asked a series of questions of about 2,500 Americans. And we found two broad theses, I think, could describe this data set. The first is that there is, in fact, a concern for and desire to have and belief that we do have a fundamental national unity. So more than 8 in 10 Americans say that they believe in the concept of national unity, believe that it exists. So that, you could say, is the side which speaks to the instinct of Americans to have a national unity. But then the other point you mentioned, that could be the second finding of this data set, is that of those who do believe that we have this national unity, they're deeply worried that we're losing it, that it's in the process of unraveling. So an assertion of national unity, yet a concern that it's being lost. This would be, I think, constitute the attitude of Americans. And some, as you mentioned in that, not only believe that it's weakening, but believe that we don't have one and can't have one. So this gets us into the, I think, the opening of the report, which, while affirming the importance of national unity, also speaks of a little bit of an identity crisis, that people are no longer sure about this. And I'd add a generational aspect to it, what the data reveal. Namely that it seems from the data that those over 35 years of age, which I suppose we could call middle age to be generous and over, that they express a concern that they failed to bequeath the most important treasure, namely this belief in national identity, to the succeeding generation. So it's as if the middle-aged and older generation has a sentiment that it made a mistake, or that it didn't fully live up to its obligation to pass this on to the next generation. And there's some support for the data in this proposition, in that the age group from 18 to 34 on a number of different indices is much less committed to the idea of national identity than are those over 35. That would be a finding implicit in the data. And beyond the data, these meetings, I think, provided an opportunity to probe just these questions with a number of educators. And they shared this view, that a concern that in the younger generation and the generation of those now in school, that both the belief in and understanding of the national identity have been weakening.
We're talking about this report on America's national identity, e pluribus.
Yeah, that's it, guys. I just want to put that in the mix here of our conversation, to see that they already, with this research that they made, I can't say that it was biased or not, but certainly if it comes from some type of university, has some type of bias, but they were able to map out the deconstruction of North American identity, right? National identity. That was very interesting, and because we actually they were able to map it out, but what actually is happening is the contrary, right? Like is the very how I say, not even conservative, reactionary upstream of Make America Great Again, coming from, from Trump and things like that, in a sense to 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 bubble up a type of North America identity that even doesn't exist anymore. Like in a sense that it's related to the 19th century. I don't know, 18th century, something extremely reactionary and extremely, closed in itself. And he was, if you guys see the video until the last minute, he said that the possibility to America be more influenced by people coming from other places because of its policy to integrate immigrants, right? He says that. The national identity of the typical North American. He says that exactly in 10 years, 15 years, will be the national identity of the human race, of the of our species as a whole, in the sense that it's going to contain all the cultural imprints coming from people all over the world. That was in this his final words in this thing. So yeah, I think that was a stopper. Stop. I think the stop conversation. I just want to put it in the mix, but that's okay. Even because we are already in the top of the hour. But yeah, so any other thoughts, people, before we close up here?
I'll paste some of this into the we should paste some of this into the Discord chat, so we've got some of these links in there. I think this is some good stuff here. If you can share that video in there, that would be useful. I think there is something about where we are culturally in all of this. And that's important. And that's also, that cultural piece comes down to also gender as well. I like to think, sometimes I think it's nice to think of gender more culturally than as this, so it's also there's a culture of embodiment and it's a culture of being. And how does that fit in this world of increasing technology? And that comes back to what you were trying to do, Lauren, where the affordances of being online and being able to connect to people through dating platforms, and then you've got it reverses into stuff, and that's where that tetrad, the tetrad from Malcolm McLuhan, where you've got some things where the technology extends and certain things which it makes obsolete.
Oh, okay.
So you've got that, the things that you can now do with technology, also it reverses into other things that would have been done before, other kinds of conversation, just like the phone did, right? Before the phone, you would have had the town crier, or you'd have had there's all sorts of different ways that we would have communicated, but some things just couldn't do, just like we couldn't do what we're doing now, right? So, but then there's other things that everything's a trade-off, right? At some level.
Okay, Lauren, I just want to know if you can share a little bit, how was the pitch that you guys did last week?
Oh, it was good. We didn't win, but I think our instructor was super proud of us, and we made a lot of progress, and it was good. So we were happy.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
like you guys are preparing for, it's evolving the way to do the pitch, or but she was very good. At least in my end here, I could grasp everything that she said, and there was no doubt, at least for me. I don't know about Stefan, but no doubt about anything she was saying. Like, when you do a pitch in such little time, it's very difficult to be concise, to be coherent, to be, to deliver the message directly, and you understand the main points that you want to make visible for everybody. And yeah, for me it was on the spot. Very good.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, guys, that's it. If there's nothing else to say, let's finish up. Okay, have a good day. And that was a very good one. I think that we talk about so much things, so different things here, and things that at first glance it doesn't seem that they are related, right? Correlated, but they have correlations. And yeah, it was very good. Bye bye.
Till next week. Bye bye.
Yeah, keep well. Speak soon. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.